Welcome into another Inside Carolina special podcast. I guess we can call that Scouting the Room. This time it's the offensive line. That is Jason Staples. I am Tommy Ashley. We are always sponsored by Johnny T-shirt. That intro kind of ends so abruptly. It kind of throws me off a little bit. So not a very seamless transition into this, but we can start, Jason, and I'll say this out of the gate. This room has some depth. We've talked about a few position groups recently that had little or no depth. Well, this offensive line room has 11 guys that we will talk about in some form or fashion. If you have not checked out Jason Staples' scouting reports on the message boards, they've been running since the week of the week of June 23rd. And here we are in the first week of July talking about it as a whole. Jason, just out of the gate, depth, 11. Good, bad, indifferent, better than most, similar to some. What's your overall take before we get into the individual areas?
Better than most, and by that I mean really better than most, and not like at the level of Tiger Woods' putt at the players, but better than most. You generally speaking, your minimum of offensive linemen that you want to carry into a season, the bare minimum, is 8 guys you can trust to play good enough winning football. If you have 8, you can usually survive a normal season. You want 10 or 11 or 12, but most teams do not get that luxury. Now, they've got more bodies. The real question is whether or not they have that as many bodies as they would like that they fully trust. And I'm not entirely sure that that's the case, but they do have, I think, more overall depth than they'd had before. And I think they brought in an interesting mix. I think a good mix of experienced, high floor players, guys that you know have played college football and have not just peed down their leg, that you can probably win with against a lot of the teams on your schedule. Guys with 4 figures snaps in terms of snap count. They brought in several of those guys, and then they also brought in some younger guys that to date they've kind of peed on the floor a little bit. But they've got big paws, and they might turn into a killer down the line. So they brought in a combination of those two. And I think that sort of shows how they're trying to build. And what have they said from the beginning? They're going to try to build inside out. I think you can see that offensively more easily than defense, partly because it's easier to get offensive linemen that can play in the portal generally than it is to get top-level defensive linemen. Top-level defensive linemen are really expensive. And with offensive linemen, the other thing is it's generally more important to be good across the 5 than to have one great one or 2 great ones. You can have 3 great offensive linemen and still be terrible on the offensive line if the other 2 are bad. If you've got 2 or 3 great defensive linemen, well, you're probably going to wreck shop. So on the offensive line, you want to be above average across the board, and then everything that you add on top of that is gravy. But you can't be bad at any one position, or it's going to cost you. And I think the way that they recruited was to try to avoid that, and that's kind of where they're at. I think by and large, they were mostly successful on that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Something that a lot of people don't think about, and we've seen it with teams who may have a great center, may have great guards around them, and then tackles are awful, and they just get whipped consistently on the offensive line. Let's talk a little bit about it. You mentioned snap counts, and we'll get into it as you go through these sort of segments or things. But you got 2,700 snaps for one guy, and you got 94 snaps for another. And the ratings of those two guys coming into school could not be more different. But let's get into it, Jason. And for folks that haven't watched these shows yet, go back and check out a defensive tackle, defensive line or edge, a linebacker, defensive backs. We sort of go through, the standouts or whatever you want to call it. But we're going to start with the alpha, Jason. I think I know who would be the alpha, but I'll let you go, and I will nod in agreement if you go with what I'm thinking.
So for me, the alpha is Austin Blasky. And the reason for that is multifold. Number one, with Blasky, he's your returning center. So he's already been in a leadership role. He's called your fronts, and he was better than average at that position in the ACC last year. So that's number one. And he's a returnee. He's got respect in that locker room. That's number one. Number two, though, is he's the one guy in your offensive line who can play all 5 spots. And his versatility on this offensive line is, I think, really important for how they're going to approach things coming into the season. Because I don't think it's a guarantee that he's going to be the starter at center. We saw in the spring that he was not the main guy that took the snaps with the one group at center. He was at guard. And he also took some snaps at right tackle in the spring. The thing that he lets this group do and lets the offensive coaching staff do is feel comfortable mixing and matching to get their best 5 on the offensive line on the field. And they feel like they can put him wherever they need to make sure that the other 4 are the best 4. Because he can play wherever the biggest weakness is going to be, that he can plug in and be the guy and make that at least above average. That's where he's going to go. I think he's pretty average at right tackle. I think he's probably average or maybe below average if he's forced to play left tackle. They went out and they got a guy that I think is going to play left tackle, so I don't think that's a concern. I think he's above average at any of the spots on the interior. And essentially what that does, like I said, is that gives you a security blanket to where if, like last year, you suddenly struggle really badly at right tackle and you just can't pass protect, he can slide out there and play that position and be a viable pass protector. I mean, we're not talking Orlando Pace. We're not talking, Walter Jones at offensive tackle, but we are talking about a guy that can get it done and be reliable there. And so for me, the combination of versatility, leadership, overall quality of snaps that he took last year, taking a little bit of a step forward, all of that to me makes him the alpha in the room. And then it's just a matter of where does he fit.
And to your point, where does he fit based on the rest of the guys? We've talked about the puzzle pieces all the time. You put a puzzle together, it might look really good, but you might not have the puzzle exactly like it needs to be. It still works, but it's not perfect. And with Blasky's versatility, I think you're spot on there. You got to have guys that can play. We talk about cross training forever. They've certainly been doing that. Austin Blasky, Jason Staples, alpha of the offensive line room. Moving on down the line, I'll keep it on. We'll go alphabetical, and this is the breakout player. There's some guys on this roster that we'll get to in a minute in some other areas, but your choice of the breakout, Jason.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because breakout implies a guy that hasn't really done it before, but is gonna really step it up and get it done this year. And I'm not sure that in terms of the mix of guys that they have, anyone really qualifies for that, except that, unless you're talking about moving up a level and doing it in a power conference as opposed to, a lower level. And for that, I'm going to say the breakout guy, and it's strange to say because the breakout guy is the guy that's had the second most snaps on this out of this group is probably Daniel King. And I think he's the guy that plays. I think he's most likely a clear starter at one of the guards. And he becomes a rock solid guy. Right now, I have him penciled in as the right guard, but he could play left guard if need be. And again, it depends on sort of what the mix is with where other guys fit. But I think he might be that breakout guy in terms of showing what he can do at this level instead of at the prior level. So, yeah, I think he's a good player. I think he's got a chance to be an above average ACC player. So, yeah, I like what I see from him. I think he's probably your breakout guy, at least as close to it out of this group as you're going to get.
Yeah, that is Daniel King out of Troy. And don't get me wrong, Troy can play. Troy's had some good football teams. We've seen that in the past. Daniel King moving up, quote unquote, moving up a level to North Carolina as Jason's breakout player. Jason, before we go on to the next thing, real quick, if you can sort of nutshell it, why is it not as simple? You know, somebody says, well, why can't said person just play right tackle or left tackle, or, you know, what's the difference? So obviously, disregarding the quarterback and the left-handedness or the right-handedness of the quarterback, why are these positions so different? You know, a tackle is not a tackle. It's a right tackle and a left tackle for a reason. Why is it different?
Some of it has to do with the way that offenses tend to be designed. And number one, it's that most offenses tend to be right-handed in terms of the direction that they tend to run the football, in terms of, you know, where the H-back is going to line up more often, different things like that. Some of that is because quarterbacks tend to be right-handed. Some of it is for other reasons, inertia, just the way that things tend to get called. But that's number one. So offenses tend to be a little bit right-handed, especially in the running game. So a lot of times historically, and again, part of that is just because of the pass protection with a right-handed quarterback, you're going to wind up needing the best blindside protector to be your left tackle. So normally you put your more solid run blockers who are maybe not quite as good as pass blockers on that right side at right tackle. Normally. And that holds, you know, various levels coming up. Now, when you have a lefty at quarterback, which Carolina is going to start a lefty this year, sometimes, you know, you actually want to flip that and you want your best pass protector to be on the blind side of your left-hander. But this is where it gets tricky, and that's that just like everybody is, well, all but a few people, some people are amphibious, but most people are pretty strongly right-handed or left-handed. The same thing kind of works that way for offensive linemen. And some guys just can pass set or step significantly better one direction compared to the other. Some of it is because they just grew up playing on that side. You know, he played on that side since he was a freshman in high school or 7th grade or whatever. And that's just the steps that he learned, and he can dance over there, but he can't dance the mirror image on the other side. And that's the thing. I mean, on one side, you're dancing the lead in the tango. On the other side, suddenly you're having to mirror those steps and dance exactly the opposite. For some guys, they can do it. Some guys can just flip-flop and go from one side to the other, and it's not a problem. Some guys, it never clicks in their head. They're just a right-handed or a left-handed player, or right-footed or left-footed player, and you got to play them on the side where they can do it. So it's not as simple as, well, you just put your best pass protector on the left side for a right-handed quarterback, and if you put the lefty in there, you just flip him over to the right side. It's not that simple because some guys just can't do it. Now, if you have a guy who can do it, or if you have two tackles who can be equally efficient or productive on both sides, and one's a lot better a pass protector than the other, then you just put him on the side that's going to protect the blind side naturally. That just doesn't tend to be the case as often as what a lot of people think. Again, amphibious offensive linemen are not as common as what you might imagine.
Yeah, nobody can use their hands and feet the same way Charles Shackelford could. I mean, it's tougher than it looks, folks.
Yep.
Let's move on down the line talking to Jason Staples. This is Inside Carolina Scouting the Room. Hey, you got the reference. I got the person that made the reference. So hopefully the young folks in the room and watching this can keep up with all that. I didn't miss the opportunity this time. Let's look at time to prove it. I'm mixing it up a little bit. Time to prove it player here. Seems like there's a lot, lot of potential options, but I think I know one. I'll let you go, and we'll see if we can figure it out.
Trevion Green.
Really?
Yeah. To me, it's Trevion Green. He was a guy last year who, as a run blocker, had moments where he was dominating. And then he had whole games where, as a pass blocker, it was a disaster. And, you know, he struggled with his conditioning at times. I know last year, you know, I talked to someone on the coaching staff last year, and one of the reasons they went down and got the Georgia Tech transfer that they got, who wound up not being any good, wound up showing up and not being quite in the shape that they'd hoped, and not being able to contribute like they wanted, got banged up in practice as well. One of the reasons they got him was that they knew that just conditioning-wise, at right tackle, they would need to be able to rotate. And then they wound up not really being able to rotate, and you could see that Trevion, just conditioning-wise at times, it was an issue. You get into the, you know, later stages of a half, and suddenly those speed rushers would just run around him. They can't have that this year. And he's a true right tackle. I mean, he's not a you know, natural pass protector who's, you know, as nimble as what you'd like ideally for you know, a guy that's going to play on the left side. He's a right tackle for a reason historically, but he's got the length and some of the tools to be better in that regard than he was. And just fundamentally, there were times where, again, he would get into those situations, especially against speed guys, and his fundamentals would break down, partly just because his feet weren't quick enough. He didn't have the confidence to hold the fundamentals on that. And then the combination of slower feet, breakdown in fundamentals, along with a breakdown in confidence, suddenly you get a guy that's given up a ton of pressure. I think he can be better than that. I think if he can drop it, if I were on this coaching staff, I would be essentially demanding that he play 15, 12 pounds minimum lighter than he did last year, which would tell me that he is really committed to being in great shape. I feel like if he came into the season, he was probably 345, he was probably 350 last year. Would you say? Yeah,
at least.
He might have been 360 for all I know. He should be playing as...
That's a monster of a man.
He is enormous. Enormous. He should be playing at like 335. If he can play there, have his feet to where, you know, as I understand it, they've done a whole lot of running and cutting and jumping, and the offensive linemen haven't been exempt from that this offseason. If that can take... Now you got a guy who can be that kind of mauler with the length, the just enormous size, and you get it to where he's not going to break down conditioning wise, and he's got the feet to actually hold up against some of the quicker rushers. Now you got a player. If he doesn't do that, if he comes in a little bit out of shape, if he still struggles in pass protection, he's not going to win the right tackle job. Somebody else, they'll put somebody else in there at some point. He may rotate in when they just want to mash, but he's not going to be the full-time right tackle unless he comes in and goes out and wins it and shows he's ready to play ball on the outside better than he did last year. The potential's there, but he's going to have to prove it.
Absolutely. Time to prove it. Trevion Green. Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, a monster of a man, and you would like to see him take that step forward, just to take advantage of the physical gifts that he was provided. And yeah, because he's huge, and when he gets rolling downhill on somebody, but there were times last year where he was a revolving door out there, and he's going to he got Jacoby Criswell killed a couple times, and so we'll see Talking with Jason Staples. This is the Inside Carolina Scouting the Room podcast on the offensive line. Johnny T-shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Our sponsors, go visit them on Franklin Street or online and get your gear. Tar Pit Premium Message Board, get you 10% off as well. Let's go, Young. But before we move on, I was going to say Miles McVay there. Just because I think Miles McVay is the highest rated guy. If we're going by high school ratings, Miles McVay would be my time to prove it. I'm not sure it's ever going to happen. But
I'm not sure it's ever going to happen with him either, but he's, I think, a year young for that, for him to be that guy, to be a time to prove it. I think this year is the year where he's got to figure out how to get coached, how to be, basically how to put it all together to start becoming the guy that he could be. I think next year is the year where it's like, okay, dude, you got to go or get off.
Yep.
You got to do it. And, next spring is to me, I'll say it now. If he's not the number one guy to watch next spring, I'd kind of be surprised, because he's got that ability. Like you said, the tools jump out at you in terms of the length. And again, he's another guy that I think he's actually bigger than Trevion Green. I mean, he's the same, basically they're same kind of size, but he's another guy that I think played 15 to 20 pounds heavier than he ought to. And just getting himself into the kind of shape that he needs to be in, disciplining himself to really commit to being the guy that he needs to be on and off the field, to develop into what he could be. I think he's going to be that guy of time to prove it next year. I don't think he's quite there this year.
Great point there. That is Miles McVay on the screen. Like Jason said, another just a monster of a man. I'm going to be interested to see how they come back to fall camp and how they've worked over the summer, because that's where you get the guys that are fully bought in, is what did they do over the summer to get in shape. Obviously, it's voluntold, but still, how they come into camp August 1st, July 31st, whenever the official day is, we'll see how that works. That is Miles McVay. Not yet time to prove it, but it's getting close.
Well,
it is getting
and the thing
close.
is, when you get these guys coming in, they're voluntold to work out, and how hard they go is kind of on them. But the other thing with this kind of position group, the other thing that you have to kind of look at, what were they doing with their kitchen utensils? What were they eating? Tells you a lot about how committed they are. It's not just about workouts. With guys like Trevion Green, with guys like Miles McVay, who are just, easily, those guys could easily weigh in at 355, 360. I mean, they're huge. With guys like that, they have to have that much more discipline to come in all cut up, and endurance athletes call it on the razor. You get elite cyclists and so on talk about being on the razor when they hit that point in their periodization where they're at the absolute peak of their capacity. They've trimmed up to where they're maxing out their power to weight ratio. Well, what you want coming into August is you want to be pretty close to that. You want to be at a point where, look, you're moving. You're coming in at, 335, 338. And you're going to drop a little bit of weight in camp. So maybe you come in, if you want to play at 335, you come into camp at 339, 338, and you're going to drop another 5 or 6 pounds during camp because it gets hot. But that's the thing. You've got those guys. It's not just about how hard they worked in the weight room or on the practice fields. Is what did they eat, and how did they eat, and when did they eat, and how often did they eat, and how much did they drink, which might be even more significant with a lot of these guys. What did they drink over the course of the off season? That's going to tell us a lot, and you'll be able to see. You can look at those lower legs. You can look at at those bellies and be able to tell, like, okay, well, he wasn't serious enough. He came in, he's just not there.
It's a great point. Moving on down the line, young buck to watch. We talk about this on each thing, on each of these shows. You've got some to choose from. Young guy to watch for Carolina. I've already taken Miles McVay off the table with my earlier thing, and you said he's too young to be time to prove it. But who you got here?
To me, it's still Aiden Banfield. He's a returning starter at guard. Played well. He was roughly at replacement level last year as a first-year true freshman guard, which is really rare. You normally expect to see a good step forward after a season like that, especially if he's able to make it through healthy, which he basically was. The thing is, it's not clear. I think as of right now, he's not a starter. They recruited over him when it comes to the transfer portal, but he's still a guy that I think is going to contend to potentially win a starting job. And even if he doesn't, he's a guy that probably gets into the rotation and becomes a guy that they can trust. He's a tough SOB. You could see that last year as a true freshman, just the way that you and I remember we were watching that open practice and we saw them go into goal line, and I'm walking over to Jeff Saturday going, who is that guy? Who's at left guard? That dude's nasty. He's like, oh yeah, that's the true freshman. It's like, okay, he's going to start, isn't he? Because he played with a chip on his shoulder as a true freshman. So that's going to fit in. Like I said, I think they recruited some vets to potentially play over him at that spot, but he to me is the closest thing to a young guy to watch in terms of a truly young guy that has a chance to really earn starter level reps out of this group.
Aiden Banfield, yeah, I couldn't believe a true freshman started on that offensive line with the not necessarily the experience or the talent they had, but they had some older guys there, and he pushed his way to the front, like we talked about. Jason, when you look at this, we're running out of superlatives, and we still got a bunch more guys to talk about. So I've got pictures for everybody. So let's see if we can use them. But let's go to Mr. Consistency for here. I think that could probably be Blasky, but I'm going to let you pick somebody else if you've got it.
You can make a case for Blasky here, but I think it's Will Osteen.
I knew you were going to pick him, and he's the one I don't have picture queued up. So talking, I'll get it queued up.
Yep. So 2,700 snaps in his career. 2,700 snaps, and he still has a year left to play. This guy's going to wind up over 3,000, probably 3,500 snaps on his college career. That is crazy.
That is
now, some of those were lower level. He was on Jacksonville State, and as they made the jump up, he's a guy that, I think when you watch him, in some ways he's kind of the opposite of a guy like Trevion Green. He's undersized. He's maybe 290, or at least played at about that. 290. He's kind of stubby. I mean, you can see in that picture he's not as long armed and just generally not as tall as what they have with some of these other guys. I mean, you look at the rest of the offensive line, and these guys are huge. They're enormous, right? Miles McVay is listed at 6'6", 342. You've got Trevion Green is 6'7", and like I said, I think he played probably 350 last year, somewhere in there. Jordan Hall, 6'8", 315. These are really big guys. And then you have Will Osteen. He's listed at 6'4", 290. I'm not sure he's a full 6'4". But then you watch him and you go, boy, does he move his feet real pretty. And he's really consistent. When it comes to the fundamentals of playing the position, he's rock solid. He has to be when he's playing against better competition, because he's a little light in the butt. He's not going to anchor as easily. He can't just depend on the physical gifts. With 2,700 snaps, if he was going to be able to depend on the physical gifts to that level, he wouldn't be playing in college anymore. Right? He'd be moving up to the next level. But he's been a good player, an above replacement level player, even to the plus level player, a quality player at the ACC level kind of player for several years now. You go back and you watch him against Louisville, who they played last year, if I'm remembering correctly. You go back and you watch him, and he really flashed. He showed that he could handle the edge talent that they had there. And, they had a good defensive line last year. He got pushed around a little bit. He got, knocked off his feet a couple times in the run game early in the game. And then you started to see him, as the game went on, start to adjust to the level. And I think he's a guy that, just in terms of the consistency, his feet never stop moving. He never, he'll get onto a guy and, maybe have not quite the perfect angle or whatever for a given block, but the feet never stop moving, and he's always getting himself into better position, and he's always recovering. He's always, if he's in great position, he's sticky because the feet just don't stop. And when you got feet that don't stop at that position, you can be pretty sticky. If you're sticky, you end up consistent. I think he's Mr. Consistency out of this group. And I think he's likely your starting. He played left tackle for Jacksonville State. I'm curious to see whether or not he's actually able to play both sides at that level. If he is, he may be your starting right tackle, and they may end up moving somebody to left. But either way, he's one of your starting tackles. He's your best pass protector on this team, and you kind of build around him at that spot.
That is Will Osteen out of Jackson State. Let's move on down, but I've got pictures to show. And we're now at the rank the room area. Let's do this. Since we've got some guys we haven't talked about, give me a couple sentences about each of these. I'll flash them on the screen. Deal?
Yeah.
You ready? Jakai Moore, South Carolina. Everybody remembers the South Carolina game a couple of years ago when it was a bloodletting on there, and he was on the team. But your thoughts in a couple minutes on him.
So he's another guy with a huge number of snaps, 1,760 snaps. He's another guy who he's a pre-COVID player. He's still on he's using his COVID eligibility this season. So he is a super senior with I think he's got 6 years of eligibility already under his belt, but a couple of red shirts in there, and then now the COVID year. The big question for him is really whether he can stay healthy. He's had trouble staying healthy over the course of his career. I think if you watch him later in his career, he started out at tackle, and then he got banged up. And later in his career, he's wound up playing more guard. But he's played 4 positions on the offensive line. He's sort of like another Blasky in certain ways in terms of the flexibility and the versatility. Another guy that they could line up at right tackle. They could line him up. He's played left tackle. He played left tackle at South Carolina, had more than one start there. He had double-digit starts at guard at South Carolina. Where does he fit? We don't know on this offensive line. But he and Blasky are kind of your wild cards, potentially, to say, okay, where do we put these guys? To, who are our other 3, potentially, to put around these guys to figure out who's the best in the room, to get my best 5 on the field. He may be one of those best 5, but we don't know because he missed the entire season last year with injury. He had shoulder surgery. You see the little shoulder brace on his right shoulder there, but he had shoulder surgery before last season, so he missed the entire season. We don't know where he's going to be conditioning wise, strength wise, any of that after last year. But he's a guy that has actually played pretty good football, and at sometimes very good football, here and there when he's been healthy in the SEC. And he's got a bunch of snaps in the SEC. And if you go back to that bloodletting from the 9 sacks that North Carolina had against South Carolina in that game, you know how many of them were against him? 0. He actually played reasonably well in that game. He might have had the best game. I mean, it was a low bar, but the best game out of their offensive line in that game. So I think he's a guy that if nothing else, if he's not a starter, I think he's probably your first guy off the bench, your swing tackle, your sixth man who, if somebody's not playing well enough at right tackle, maybe he's the guy that goes out there. Maybe he starts at right tackle out of this group. Maybe he starts at left guard out of this group and Blasky's at center. There's a lot of different combinations if he comes in and plays the way that he has at different points in his career, where I think he's very capable of being one of your best five, and I think that makes you better as a group. And again, with he and Blasky being able to play as many positions as they can, that gives you a lot of comfort as an offensive line coach to go, okay, I can get my best five on even if somebody goes down.
Next up, Jordan Hall, transfer from UAB. Not
Huge
much on him.
Potential.
Huge potential. 156 snaps in his career so far. Just give me something on him.
So he's long, 6'8", 310, 315 pounds. In a lot of ways, he's a lot like what you're replacing at left tackle that just transferred out in the transfer portal. He's very similar to what you got from Texas State last year. Maybe a half a season or so behind development-wise. But all in all, I think he's got a lot of potential. And, of course, I'm referring to Howard Sampson. Yeah. He has some similarities to Sampson. I think he's actually maybe a little bit more fluid athlete than Sampson. He's not quite as Sampson came in a little heavier, a little bigger, more developed in that respect. But he's a basketball type build, natural mover, has to learn to bend a little bit more, through the waist and the knees. But I think the potential's there. And you look at this, he looks almost like a tight end, right? He's not carrying any bad weight. This is a guy that you can bulk up. He could play another 20 pounds heavier with good weight, with good muscle, and be an NFL-type mover at that position. So I think he's a year, maybe 2 years away, but I think as early as next year, depending on how he develops, depending on how he works in the weight room, some of those things, by next year, he may be one of your bookend starters at tackle and be an ACC, plus-level ACC player. He's got a long way to go to get there, but can be a really good player. That
is Jordan Hall. Next up, William Boone. This guy we've heard some things about.
Yeah, Boone I like. And actually, he's one of those guys where 6'6", 340. He's just a hair smaller than Trevion Green. He's actually, I think, a wider body than Green. Maybe not quite as long of a body. But I think he's a good athlete, and he's a better natural pass protector than Green, but he's not quite as powerful as a run blocker as Green is. And even though he's a more natural pass blocker, his fundamentals as a pass blocker were further away. He's not really been coached at the level that he's going to get at North Carolina. And again, one of those guys who is competing for a job. He's still got 2 years of eligibility. Even if he doesn't win a job this year, he may be the starter at, say, right tackle next year. He's another guy that could potentially slide in and play guard. I think he's probably in the rotation. I don't have him penciled in as a starter at this point, but it wouldn't shock me if he went out there after a great offseason with, benefiting from some of the coaching that he's got, if he went out there and managed to win the job. I mean, there's enough closeness there at that position that he's going to have some opportunities, and I think he's going to play some snaps. It's just a matter of how many and how quickly he's going to develop to potentially earn those snaps.
Chad Lindberg of Georgia, of Rice, now at North Carolina. Didn't mention him on the superlatives, but this guy I think is going to play, Jason.
Yeah, he's another guy who's played both guard and tackle. Really good versatility in this group. And he's another guy that if somebody goes down, he can play left tackle, he can play left guard, and he's played some right guard. So, again, where do you put him? A lot of this is going to depend on other people. I think in terms of athletically, he's not quite the athlete that some of the other guys are. He's a little bigger and longer, say, than Osteen, but he doesn't move as well as Osteen. I don't think he's really a tackle mover, even though he's played there. And then at guard, he's not quite the mauler that some of these other guys are, like Daniel King and so on. I have Lindberg more as kind of a swing backup I don't see him as a starter on this roster, but again, you're talking about a guy with a lot of snaps, 781 snaps, and starts at multiple positions. That is probably one of your backups coming into the season, and can come in and potentially and play at a level that's probably not going to get you beat. So, that's exactly what you want in terms of the kind of versatile backup that I think he can be for this group.
And last guy we have not talked about, Christo Kelly, Holy Cross. If you have not watched his media availability, I guess it's been
really impressive.
2 weeks ago. Yeah, two or 3 weeks ago. Go check it out. It's posted on Inside Carolina, of course. Great young man, very, very good interview and all. But Jason, him as a player, I don't know what's up with all these lefties we're talking about these days. But what did you see from Christo Kelly? Because he's worked at center.
Yeah, he is a lunch pail type. He will get after you. He is, he's one of those guys you watch him play and you're like, that guy loves football. He just, he's one of those guys, and he finds a way to be irritating to the defensive lineman across him. He's going to be the guy that's going to block through the whistle just that little bit more, kind of push the envelope just a little bit. Another guy that moves his feet well. I don't think he anchors as well as Blasky. There were times where, if you go back and you watch the Syracuse game, there were times where Syracuse, being a higher level than Holy Cross, when they got some one-on-ones with some guys against him, he went backwards, kind of got run over slowly from the center position at times by some of the more physical, bigger, faster, stronger types at Syracuse. Nevertheless, you're talking about a guy that at center can pull, can lead, can get downfield on screens, has really good quickness as like an outside zone blocker, regularly gets into outstanding position against guys, even when he's a little bit, when he's got a difficult angle to get to those reach blocks and things. So I really like him. And, the real question is, it's entirely possible, and I wouldn't be surprised if this was the case, if he winds up starting at center and Blasky is at one of the guards, because that just turns out to be your best five. Maybe Blasky winds up at right tackle. Who knows? But it wouldn't shock me to see Christo Kelly starting at center this year. At a minimum, I think he is going to get some snaps and be a guy that they're going to make sure gets time, because, again, they're going to need – college football seasons are really long now. You've got to have the ability to be able to get those guys reps to keep them ready. So at a minimum, you're going to get 8-9 guys that are going to play out of this group. They're going to rotate at different points. And I wouldn't be shocked to see him get some time at center. I would not be shocked if he wound up one of the best five and wound up playing at center. But we're just going to find out. I mean, there's a lot of things that we just don't know yet. And I don't think the coaches really know yet who's going to win these jobs across the board. I think they know Will Osteen is going to have one tackle position. I think they're probably pretty confident that Blasky is going to win a starting position somewhere else, but where it is not clear. And I think Daniel King is probably a starter, and everything else is just kind of up in the air in terms of where and how things are going to mix. And Kelly is one of those pieces that, again, he may be better at center and Blasky at guard. They may be better with that mix than they are with other mixes with Blasky at center. So we'll see.
That is Christo Kelly. Like I said, check out his media availability. Great interview. Great guy to talk to. He's going to be fun to interview throughout the course of the season. We didn't do this in one of the rooms in one of the shows before, and immediately somebody asked about it on the message board. So I will not forget it. And going into this, we said we were going to do this for 25 minutes. Well, 45 is the new 25.
It's hard to do this many.
So we wanted to get everybody involved. You got your superlatives, but I wanted Jason to talk about each individual player, even though you can go check out the individual scouting reports, and they've put together a.
And you still have Jakai Norwood, by the way, who we haven't even mentioned because he doesn't have enough snaps for me to have broken him down. But he's got potential.
Oh, that's yeah, and that's a guy that we liked a lot last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, so plenty still to talk about, but we're going to talk about where this room ranks, not only on the roster or on the Carolina team, but within the ACC. Jason, it's tough with so many transfers and not having continuity of the same five and all that. But you scouted them and you know a lot about the ACC. Where's this team hold up, or this unit hold up against the rest of the league?
Against the rest of the league, like you said, is hard because you're having to kind of get the you're having to kind of figure out who transferred where and everything else. But I think this is probably going to be a top. I think just given talent and given depth, I think this is a top 5 offensive line in the ACC, maybe 6, somewhere in there. This is top third of the conference, just because of the mix of bodies and the experience that you have. I think they'll be able to find a combination that is competent and can play generally winning football. If they're gonna, I think they're gonna play. Clemson is the one team that I think is going to potentially overwhelm a couple of the starters. I mean, I think Will Osteen, he's going to be Mr. Consistency, but then you're going to have to play against some of those edge guys from Clemson, and that's going to be a tough task. A couple of these guys have to stay healthy, and they've been injured. But I think they've got fewer question marks and more bodies that should be able to play than what you than what you're getting from most of the rest of the conference. I think Miami is probably a better overall group. Clemson's got 4 starters back, and that was a pretty good group last year. So I think Clemson would be above this group comfortably. Miami of Florida would be above this group. Georgia Tech would be above this group. I think Brett Key does a phenomenal job with offensive line. I think Florida State, top to bottom on their offensive line, they went out and they got a few higher profile transfers that are probably going to be a little bit better with their first 5, but I don't know that they have quite as much depth as this group. I think they're probably a little bit better than this group, but they're probably in a similar tier. So there's 4. I think you're looking at Zach Rice as a guy that's likely to start at Syracuse, which tells you kind of where they are. I think NC State is probably a little behind this group. So I think somewhere around 5 or 6 in the conference is about right for where this group ranks.
And that's music to a lot of people's ears because the offense needs to be good, given the defense. Now, how does the defense improve? Maybe the offense doesn't have to be as good. We shall see. Jason, we've gone 48 minutes. I'm not going to ask any other questions, but I'm going to ask you to give me one sentence. This offensive line was better than you thought they'd be if.
If they all stay healthy.
Production-wise, what can you quantify how good the offensive line is based on end of season look back at production? I mean, clearly.
Well, I mean, yards before contact in the running game is probably the thing to look at. So,
okay.
If you're looking at, 2 yards before contact against this schedule, then that offensive line did some work.
There you go, folks. Something to look at come December. Yards before contact plus more than 2.
More than 2 would be amazing.
That's it. Stay tuned to Inside Carolina for more scouting reports, more of Jason's work, more of these shows. Hope you have a good 4th of July, folks. This will be, we got 3, 4 more of these to go. I can't even keep up, but I know we'll be right here doing them. That's Jason Staples. I'm Tommy Ashley. Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com. The offensive line. This is where we're the nitty-gritty. We'll see how Bill Belichick and his staff have put it together when it all starts against TCU on Labor Day Monday. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Tommy.